Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teaching Writing in College, where the driving question is, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? And so welcome to our episode here. This is episode 35, Transparency and Writing with AI. And I thought I would just start with a brief overview, just a kind of a recap of things that I tend to do in the classroom. I follow the Elon statement. That's an important part of what I take into the classroom. And then there's conceptual knowledge, practice, and metacognition. And that conceptual knowledge, learning about writing, is really important. Things that I've talked about before, genre, and my acronym that I have for that, ROCKS, Recurring Occasion, Content, Structure, and Style. I also teach a lot of supporting strategies like argument and other invention strategies for content. Things like evidence would fall under that for content. Structure, lots of strategies for structure that I like to use because I think that's also kind of an important part of knowledge about writing. Excuse me. And then style, also an important adjustment when it comes to writing in different genres. And there are lots of things you can do with style as well. And all of that, of course, is audience-oriented. So the recurring occasion in ROCKS, recurring occasion, content, structure, and style. Recurring occasion is very much about the relationship between writer and audience, and so on and so forth. But so that's, kind of conceptually, that's what I teach. It's learning about writing, going back to Wardle and Downs. We can teach our students about writing. We can't necessarily teach them to write. And so having all those strategies is really important, this conceptual understanding of writing. And then, of course, lots of practice in the classroom with all of those strategies, ROCKS and the supporting strategies. Metacognition, also really important. And then one of my bits of conceptual knowledge, you may remember from a previous podcast, actually one of my most popular, most listened to or watched podcast episodes was on the penny principle, where I was talking about, using formatting like APA or MLA and so on, something that writers or instructors of writing might get frustrated with. And the penny principle, I think, is a really great way to deal with that. And you might remember it's about following or finding models and then following them for documenting outside material and formatting documents. And so we'll come back to the penny principle in just a minute. This is all just background for what I'm about to share, which is portions of some of the time that I spent in class last week with my students. And I bring up transparency also because when writing with AI, I think that's something that people are expecting. When you watch the news and there is a controversy about, I think it was in Norway, there was a controversy about an ad by McDonald's that was generated by AI, and folks weren't happy that it was not generated by people necessarily. It was generated by AI, but there seems to be this desire for transparency. When is something coming from AI and when is it not? When is it appropriate? When is it not? So on. And so having that transparency, I think, is really important, not just in the classroom, but also outside of it. So in the interest of just keeping students thinking about transparency, there are some things that I did. So with this idea that I would, just include transparency as part of my that would probably fall under recurring occasion, actually, if we go back to ROCKS. Recurring occasion, content, structure, and style. It has a lot to do with audience expectations. But this new term, transparency, that I would include in learning about writing, I have a couple of practical applications of transparency, or a couple of strategies for students to use it, or to be transparent. And so I've got CardWriter, which can be found at cardwriter.vercel.app, and then also the penny principle and how to cite material that was generated by AI. And so those are some things that I've talked about with my students in the last several weeks. So in my classes, what's happening right now is we're finishing up a project. And one thing I did is I had students use at least 3 scenarios to support some arguments they were making. And they could be hypothetical scenarios or they could be real ones, maybe that they found in the news or something about whatever their topic is. But the idea is that they use these scenarios as they develop their arguments. And I said that at least one of those scenarios could be written by AI. just outright. And so I'd want them to write, a couple on their own, but also, use AI to write one, because that also, gives them a chance to practice with it a little bit. And it also gives them a chance to practice being transparent. It gives them a chance to practice incorporating AI into some of the writing that they do. And so I think it's useful for those reasons. And also in at least one previous session, I did some work with the Penny Principle. I introduced the Penny Principle to students, as well as additional formats. I think I probably mentioned in my presentation on the Penny Principle in the podcast, I probably mentioned how, the Penny Principle works for any citation format, really. It's just you have to find models to follow. That's what we do when students ask us questions. And just kind of doing that independently, I think, is part of being a good writer, especially if we're doing any kind of writing that shares outside information. And so there are common ones in writing courses like APA and MLA, but students could branch out, and I always encourage them to do this based on their major. Branch out, if you're going into any of the medical professions, take a look at the American Medical Association, the AMA format. Or I pose questions to students. I ask them to go out and find what formats are common in their discipline. And if they're going to go into mechanical engineering, they might have one from the AMSE. And right now, off the top of my head, I'm wondering if I got that right. AMSE. It's probably ASME, actually. I will change that. It's about mechanical engineering. So it's the American Society for Mechanical Engineers or something like that, something close to that, but it's probably the ASME. There's IEEE, which I also hear from engineers about IEEE, and also folks going into computer science. There's Blue Book that I get from students going into the legal field. There's some of the ones that we might be more familiar with in the humanities, or at least I remember hearing about them more, like the Chicago Style or Turabian, and so on and so forth. I remember hearing about both of those a little bit as an undergrad, but then also in graduate school with people going into different things. Google. So here's something that I have from the lesson plan. Google, what citation format does insert academic field here, whatever the student's academic field might be. And then also what citation format does your anticipated career use. And so fill in the brackets there with your academic field and your anticipated career to do a search and find some of those. And just for this presentation, I just went out there and used Gemini essentially in Google. And I just asked, what are all the different citation formats for writing, such as APA, MLA, ASME, and so on? Can I get a list? And so Harvard style, Vancouver style, a lot of specialized citation styles by discipline, and so I gave a big list of those. And I haven't heard my students talk about all of these, but I have heard some of them. And so this is probably something I could take into class and say, where is yours, and so on and so forth. But, or if yours isn't on this list, let's go find it. So anyway, and then the next part is to choose and follow a format for your paper that is related to your major or your career. And so the idea is that they get practice with that citation format using the Penny Principle that would be more connected to what they wish to do. And so here's a cue that I have citing AI. And I remind them you should have one scenario that was generated by AI in your notes. How does your format cite material from AI? And use the Penny Principle. And so the idea is they go back out to the internet and find a sample citation in a circumstance where material from AI would be cited, so that they can then incorporate that into their writing. And so I have them go out and find a model, take some notes on it, and then spend a little bit of in-class time just trying to put that together in their document. And here's a sample that I found. I probably did this with students. How can I use the AMA format to cite a passage written by a chatbot? And so I was just modeling what I was asking them to do. And so I put that question into Google, and I started to get some guidelines for the American Medical Association. about AI citations if they are using AI. And so they can do things in a methods or acknowledgement section. An in-text citation, it gives a model of that, about how they would go about it. It's got something for a reference list, and so on and so forth. And so just giving them a sample to show them how that works, then have them go do it on their own is what I'm doing here. And I apologize, I just lost my, oh, there it is. Okay. And then this other cue, in your most recent draft, in-text citation, introduce the source and possibly use a link. So now I'm just giving them instructions about what I just described. References at the end, provide a citation, again using your format. Also, how will you format your card writer declaration about AI use? I think did I forget to say this just now, but I did. Yeah, I mentioned card writer. What I have done, what I did earlier a few weeks ago, is I had them go out to card writer and create a little declaration. I think I have card writer here. Here it is. So cardwriter.vercel.app. It's a little tool, if you haven't seen it, where you can go in and just check some boxes. So step one is check all the steps you've practically used generative AI in the writing process. And so you could do no, I didn't use, or you could do some of the others, like I used it for drafting, or I used it for proofreading or advice or whatever it is, and give it the model. Part two is choosing a model that you used, and so I could just click one there, whether it's ChatGPT, a couple of versions of that. It's got Gemini and Claude, and you can specify others as well. And then check all the disclaimers you can provide. So it's got an accountability disclaimer, a safety disclaimer, and an academic integrity disclaimer based on whatever it is you're doing. And then when you generate that, over on the right-hand side, it gives you a little statement that you can then copy and then paste into your document. And so I have had students do that. And then the question becomes, well, how do you put that into a paper formatted in your format? And so we can spend some time working together on that. And so once again, just in the interest of transparency, that's what we have going on there. And then of course, just another note to them, give them a couple of moments to double check any AI answers. Maybe go and see if the in-text citation format that was given to them holds, if they can find maybe an online guide, or maybe they can find something for, references as well, just to double check and make sure that everything is okay. And so I think that about does it for this episode. I just wanted to kind of talk through that idea of transparency, and then also the skill that goes along with it. It's really important, I think, when I think about conceptual knowledge in the Elon statement on writing transfer, and students are supposed to learn about writing. They're supposed to learn about writing conceptually. In cognitive psychology, it's those concepts also kind of represent skills or actions and things. And what happens is there's some bouncing back and forth between sort of the conceptual abstract version of it and the way that it plays out concretely in a practical way. And so that's kind of what's going on here. I'm talking with them about transparency as a concept about writing, and then also giving them some concrete practical applications, kind of going back and forth. And later on in the semester, we could explore some other ones as well. I think that would be helpful to them as well, and just kind of keep that idea of transparency on the front burner, along with everything else I'm juggling, trying to keep on the front burner, including invention strategies or structural strategies or style strategies. So transparency, I think I said this a few minutes ago, transparency, I would say, if we're talking about a genre, and skills that are supporting students' use of genres, and those students' use of genres is represented by ROCs, recurring occasion, content, structure, and style. I would say transparency probably goes in with recurring occasion. How much do audiences expect things to be transparent, and so on, and why, and what are the dynamics about how the document or piece of writing or communication would be used. That's all kind of a writer-audience relationship, and how the communication takes place. And then content structure and style, I would say that using the penny principle to do in-text citations and to cite a piece of writing from a chatbot and things like that, those might go under, I guess in a way they go under content, because it's about a piece of AI generated text, a piece of evidence, which is, content. But also it could have to do with structuring writing, because you've got to decide where to put things, where to put that card writer statement. And then if we get into expectations for how a particular format like the American Medical Association or the APA or MLA or any of the others, kind of stylistically what they would want, if we start to get into that, that also kind of would become part of style in a genre. So it's kind of touching on lots of different parts of genre knowledge as well. And sometimes I do little activities where I ask students to say, okay, what do you think this is that we're doing? Is this more of a stylistic issue that we're doing right now? Is it structural? When we're using the penny principle, which part of rocks do you think that belongs to? Which part of rocks do you think transparency belongs to? And so on. And so those are all things you can do just in a short amount of time in class. Pose those questions once in a while as a review or maybe a reflection or something like that. I probably should have done that here. I think I was short on time and I didn't do it. But I could go back and say, okay, so when we're talking about transparency, what what part of our use of genres is that supporting? So thanks again. I appreciate all of my listeners and viewers, and I hope to put out another episode soon. Thank you so much.